My daughter-in-law blocked me on everything. Then my lawyer made one phone call that changed it all. 73 years old. And my own daughter-in-law blocked me like I was some stranger harassing her on the internet. Not just Facebook. Every single number, every email, every last door I had into my grandchildren's lives slammed shut in one afternoon, and nobody even had the decency to tell me why. One day I was grandma. The next day I was nobody. Now she thought that was the end of it. She thought a silent phone meant she'd won. What she didn't know, what she had absolutely no idea about, was that my late husband had left behind one document, buried for years, that put me in a position of power over her family's future that she never saw coming. And when my lawyer made one phone call about it, I am telling you, her whole world cracked wide open in under 2 hours. Before I tell you exactly how it happened, do me a favor. Hit that like button, hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next, and drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from tonight, because I love seeing all of you check in from every corner of the globe. Alright, let's get into it. My name is Kathy. I'm 73 years old, a retired schoolteacher, 31 years in the same elementary school, and I raised one son, David, mostly by myself after his father passed when David was just 14. I know what it is to struggle. I know what it is to work 2 jobs and still show up to every single school play with a smile on my face like I hadn't been on my feet for 10 hours. So when David finally married and gave me 2 beautiful grandchildren, Emma and Lucas, I thought my life was finally getting its reward. I thought I was going to get to be the grandmother I never really had the chance to be, a mother the easy way. Spoiling them, baking with them, being there. For the first few years, everything was wonderful. His wife, I'll call her Jessica, was sweet in the beginning. A little distant, maybe a little cool around the edges, but I chalked that up to her just being a private person. I've met plenty of daughters-in-law in my life through my church friends, and I know some of them just take a while to warm up. So I gave her time. I gave her grace. I babysat every single time she asked, no questions, no complaints, even when it meant canceling my own doctor's appointments. I paid for Emma's dance recitals. I paid for Lucas's Little League uniforms 3 years running. When their roof needed replacing and money was tight, I quietly wrote a check for $11,000 and told David not to even mention it to Jessica, because I didn't want her feeling indebted to me. I wanted her to feel like family, not like she owed me. But here's the thing about people who are used to taking. They start to believe it's owed to them. And somewhere along the way, without me even noticing it happening, I went from being Grandma Kathy who helps to being an inconvenience. A woman who overstepped. A woman who had opinions about how the kids were being raised. And look, maybe I did have opinions. I'm a retired teacher. I spent 3 decades watching how children learn and grow and thrive. And yes, sometimes I gently suggested things. Maybe Lucas needed more structure with his homework. Maybe Emma was spending too much time on that tablet at 6 years old. I never said it ugly. I never said it in front of the kids. I said it the way you talk to your own daughter, because that's what I hoped she'd become to me. It started small. Jessica stopped answering my texts as quickly. Then she started making excuses when I asked to take the kids for the weekend. Then one Sunday David called me, and I could hear in his voice that something was wrong before he even said a word. He told me Jessica felt like I was, quote, undermining her as a mother, and that she needed some space. Space. From their own grandmother. I asked him, David, what did I do? And my own son, my own boy that I raised by myself after his daddy died, he just said, Mom, I don't want to get in the middle of this. That right there broke something in me. Because a son who won't stand up for his mother has already chosen a side. He just doesn't want to say it out loud. For 2 months, space meant maybe one phone call a week, always short. Always Jessica hovering in the background telling the kids to say goodbye. Then it went quiet completely. No calls returned. No texts answered. I sent a birthday card to Lucas with $50 in it, and I never even got a thank you. Never got to know if he liked the little pocket knife I'd carved his initials into either. The one his grandfather used to whittle wood with when David was small. I sent it registered mail so I'd at least know somebody signed for it. Somebody did. Nobody called. And then came the day I'll never forget. I was trying to call David about something small just to check in, and the call wouldn't go through. Not busy. Not unavailable. Blocked. I tried Jessica's number. Blocked. I opened Facebook and her profile, which used to be full of pictures of my grandbabies that I'd comment on every single day, was just gone from my view entirely. I tried the family group text that had been running for 6 years, the one where I'd get little updates, a photo of Emma's first day of first grade, a video of Lucas scoring a soccer goal. Gone. I wasn't in it anymore. I sat at my kitchen table and I want to tell you at 73 years old I cried like a child. Because it wasn't just about being cut off from a phone number. It was 2 grandbabies who I loved with every fiber of my soul, who I used to sing to sleep, who used to run to me at the door yelling grandma, with their whole little bodies, and now I didn't even know if they knew I still existed, or if somebody had told them some story about why grandma doesn't come around anymore. I called David's cell from a friend's phone, just to see if maybe it was some kind of misunderstanding, a phone glitch, something. He picked up, sounding tired, sounding like a man who'd rather be anywhere else. And he told me flat out that Jessica felt it was healthier for their family if I wasn't involved right now. Right now. As if there was going to be some future date circled on a calendar where I'd magically be allowed back into my grandchildren's lives. I asked him one simple question. I said, David, do you agree with this? And there was this long silence, and then he said, I have to support my wife. Not I love you, Mom. Not this isn't right. Just, I have to support my wife. And then he hung up. Now I want to tell you, I am not a woman who sits around and cries for long. I taught 4th grade for 31 years. I've handled tantrums, I've handled disrespect, I've handled parents who wanted to fight me over a B+ grade. I know how to compose myself and think clearly. So after I let myself grieve for about a week, really grieve, because I think you have to let yourself feel it before you can act on it, I called my lawyer. His name was an old family friend. A man who'd handled my husband's estate years before, and who I trusted with my life. I told him everything. And I asked him, is there anything at all that I can legally do here? And that's when he asked me a question that changed everything. He said, Kathy, do you remember the trust your husband set up before he passed? Now here's something I hadn't thought about in years. My husband, before the cancer took him, was a careful man. A planner. He didn't have a lot of money, but what he did have, he wanted protected for our grandchildren's education, in case anything ever happened, in case the family ever hit hard times, in case, and this is the part that mattered, in case there was ever a family dispute that might affect the kids unfairly. He set up an educational trust, $30-some thousand at the time, grown over the years with interest, meant to be released for Emma and Lucas's college expenses when they turned 18, or earlier for private school tuition if needed. And here's the kicker. He named me, not David, not Jessica, as the sole trustee. The only person with legal authority to authorize any release of those funds. David didn't even fully remember the details, because it was something his father and I had set up quietly years before he passed, back when David was newly married and we didn't know yet what kind of woman Jessica would turn out to be. Well, it turns out Jessica had recently applied for early release of a portion of those trust funds, $12,000 to be exact, to cover Emma's tuition at a private academy she wanted to enroll her in that fall, a school Jessica had been bragging about to her friends, the kind of school with a waiting list and a dress code and a very particular kind of family attending it. And because Jessica had cut me completely out of her life, blocked, silenced, erased, she had apparently forgotten, or maybe never fully understood, that she could not touch one single dollar of that trust without my signature. My authorization. Mine. My lawyer looked into it, confirmed everything was airtight exactly the way my husband had set it up all those years ago. God rest him, and then he asked me the question. He said, Kathy, do you want me to make the call? I sat with that for a good long minute. Because part of me, I won't lie to you, part of me wanted to just say no, let her sit there and wonder why the funds weren't coming through. Let her stew in it the way I'd been made to stew in silence for months. But then I thought about Emma. I thought about that sweet little girl who used to fall asleep on my chest as a baby, who I used to walk around the block singing You Are My Sunshine to when she had colic and nobody else could get her to settle. And I realized this wasn't really about punishing Jessica. This was about finally being seen again. Being remembered as a person who mattered in that family's life. Not erased, not blocked, not silenced. So I told him yes. Make the call. Now I wasn't on that phone call myself, but my lawyer told me every detail afterward, and I have relived it in my mind more times than I can count. He called Jessica directly, introduced himself formally, and informed her that per the legal terms of the trust established by my late husband, no funds could be released without written authorization from the trustee, myself, and that as of that moment, no such authorization had been given, nor would it be, given the current circumstances of the family relationship. He said there was a long pause on the other end of that phone. A long pause. And then Jessica apparently tried to argue that this must be some kind of mistake, that surely David had access, that surely there was some other way around it. And my lawyer, bless him, calmly explained that no, there was not. The trust was airtight. My husband, rest his soul, had made absolutely sure of that. Within 2 hours my phone rang. Not blocked anymore. David's number, calling like nothing had ever happened. Like months of silence hadn't just gone by. I almost didn't answer. Let it ring twice just to breathe, just to remind myself that I was allowed to take my time. When I finally picked up, David sounded rattled in a way I hadn't heard since he was a teenager caught doing something he shouldn't have. He said, "Mom, we need to talk about the trust." Not "Mom, I'm sorry." Not "Mom, I miss you." Straight to business. And I said, "Calm as could be, David, I'd be happy to talk. But I think Jessica should be on this call too." There was some shuffling, some whispering I could hear in the background, and then Jessica's voice came on the line for the first time in months. And let me tell you, gone was that cool, dismissive tone she used to take with me. Now she sounded almost polite. Almost. She started explaining about the school, about the deadline, about how important this opportunity was for Emma's future. Like I was some stranger she needed to convince rather than a grandmother who'd already given that child years of love and $11,000 for a roof over her head that Jessica never even knew about. I let her talk. I let her get it all out. And then I said very calmly, very evenly, the way I used to talk to a student who thought they could talk their way out of a consequence. I said, "Jessica, I understand this is important to you. But I want to be very clear about something. I am not a bank account you can access when it's convenient and block when it's not. I am Emma and Lucas's grandmother. And right now, I don't even know if they remember what my voice sounds like." Nobody said anything for a moment. I could hear David breathing on the other end, that particular kind of quiet that happens when someone finally understands they've let something get very out of hand. I told them both plainly that I was not interested in fighting over the money, that I had no intention of being cruel or vindictive with something my husband had set aside out of love for his grandchildren. But I told them I would not release one single dollar until I was unblocked fully on every platform, until I was added back into that family group chat, and until we sat down all three of us face to face and had an honest conversation about what had happened and why. Not over the phone. Not through David as a messenger. Face to face like adults. There was a long silence, and then Jessica, in a voice much smaller than the one she used to use with me, said okay. We met at a little diner 2 towns over, neutral ground, the kind of place with vinyl booths and coffee that never runs out. And I'll tell you, I went into that conversation prepared to hear excuses. What I got, eventually, after some tension and some tears, mostly Jessica's, was something closer to the truth. She admitted she'd felt threatened by how close the kids were to me. She admitted she'd been dealing with some hard things of her own, feelings of inadequacy as a young mother, feeling like she was constantly being compared to a woman with 31 years of teaching experience under her belt. She admitted that cutting me off had felt, in the moment, like taking back control of something, but that watching her own children stop asking about their grandmother, slowly over weeks, had scared her more than she wanted to admit. I won't pretend it was some perfect, tearful Hallmark reunion. It wasn't. There's still some distance there that I don't think will ever fully close, some trust that got cracked in a way that doesn't repair overnight. But I authorized that trust release for Emma's tuition. Not because I had to, because I wanted Emma to have that opportunity, and because that's what my husband would have wanted too. And in exchange, I set my own boundaries clearly for the first time in my life. I told them I would not be silenced again, that if there was ever a problem, we would talk about it like family instead of one person just erasing another from existence. 2 weeks later, Lucas called me on my birthday all on his own using his mother's phone, and he sang happy birthday so off-key and so sweet that I had to sit down on my porch step and just let myself cry, the good kind of crying this time. Emma sends me pictures now from that fancy new school, and yes, I comment on every single one. And David, my son, he's still finding his way back to being the kind of man who stands up for his mother, but he's trying, and I have to let him try in his own time. I'll tell you what I learned through all of this at 73 years old, after thinking I already knew everything there was to know about family. I learned that love without boundaries isn't really love. It's just letting yourself be used. And I learned that sometimes the people who try to erase you the hardest are the ones who forgot you still had a pen in your hand the whole time. If this story meant something to you, if it reminded you of your own family, your own grandbabies, your own battles fought quietly at 70-something years old, I want you to like this video right now, subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and tell me down in the comments where you're watching from tonight. I read every single one of them, and I love knowing just how far these stories travel. Until next time, take care of yourselves and never, ever let anybody make you feel small in your own family. You matter. You always did.